Welcome, everybody. Come on in. Don't sit at the back. Come to the front. This is a nice little moment for us to talk about EV charging. So we're going to wait 20 seconds to start going. But to start, can start with a little bit of intro. I'm Greg here, head of marketing at Switch. Ramsey, who is scheduled the registration, unfortunately couldn't make it, so I'm here instead. I hope I can do justice to the material and talking about EV charging. But most importantly, we've got Thomas here, who is our director of sales engineering, who is the guy for all of you to get all of your burning questions, the super technical, the business model, like the whole kit and caboodle. He will be, going through most of the content, which he does so well. And yeah, without further ado, I say let's kick this off. So welcome. For those who just joined, chat's on the right. This is going to be recorded, so you'll have this afterwards. But please let us know where you're coming from. Any burning questions you have or stuff you want to know about. Do you want to know about load sharing? Do you want to know about design? Do you want to know about chargers? Let us know and use that chat throughout the whole time. We see it. We want to make this as much of a conversation as humanly possible. Let's go. Thomas, next slide. Or do you want to say something?
Maybe a quick introduction.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. Thomas Martin. I run sales engineering here at Switch. You can think of this as the solutions engineering department. So everything around getting our technology into a building and then just kind of making a connection between use case, technology, and in practice, how do we do it? So hopefully today I can give you a picture of just how we work and how we design sites, as well as what we see in terms of behavior and consumption in buildings today. And hopefully that can give you a beacon to head towards for your own context, whether that's multiple portfolios, properties, one specific EV charger, you name it. I will answer questions on the go if I see them in the chat here. So feel free to ask clarifying questions as we go. In terms of agenda, I want to try and keep things to maybe 20, 25 minutes. So I'll try and move quick. I know we've all got busy jobs, emails going off in the background. So I'll try and move quick with the hopes of giving you enough content that you can ask questions to dive deeper if need, if not follow up. So hopefully we'll move quick here. So Greg, maybe you want to walk us just quickly through the agenda and maybe introduce the company. Yeah,
let's do it. We'll start with just a quick summary. And the first is about us. So Switch, we're an EV charging solutions provider. We're a network here in Canada. We've got, now I think it's more than 20,000 chargers. This is a slightly outdated slide. And yes, we're here in Canada, headquartered in Toronto, but now we support properties, multifamily, commercial, retail, public, all across North America. And that's a little bit about us. We are an end-to-end solution. So we do the whole kit and caboodle, everything from design, plan, work with contractors on the ground, work on incentive programs, the quote, getting the whole process going to the moment where installation happens. We support contractors on the ground, be it yours or our partners, to make sure that they're installed properly. And then when they actually turn on, we're managing electricity, we're managing billing, all the aspects, and can support with operations and maintenance for when things go wrong. We are always here from start to finish. So why charging now? Right? For those who know, high level, super high level EV sales, they're projected to hit 53% of all cars here in Canada. Obviously, there's a lot of question around mandates and what's going on, but the bar on EVs are continuing to be sold day in, day out. And when it comes to the behavior of charging, it's also known that 80% of charging happens at home or work. I didn't update this, but if you're working, commercial or at home charging, be it multifamily or commercial, it's the place where you need to have charging. And when we did some research last summer, we found out that multifamily residents are 2.5 times more likely to own an EV if they have charging at home. That barrier is critical. You guys are probably seeing it, understanding in your properties that if you build it, if you build it, they will come concept. Just because you don't have chargers in the lot doesn't mean your tenants, be it commercial or residential, aren't wanting it, or that you could attract high caliber tenants with EV charging. 67% of residents say that having an EV charging in their building would make them consider getting an EV. There's a direct correlation and causation between having charging at home and actually getting an EV. So just some thoughts there. And then let's roll into the plan. So let's talk about some key questions to consider that you may be considering. And this is where I'll float these back and forth to Thomas so that you can get the lay of the land of some of the core technology and questions out there.
Yeah, and I think to first address how we start building a plan for our building, we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. And the reason we do that is because every building's different. Every group of tenants, residents, guests, whoever it might be, is different. So we like to approach it from a consultative approach, with every building having a slightly different solution.
So yeah, first question, let's talk about the actual physical chargers. What type of chargers are available / do I need?
Yeah, it's a fairly a question we ask early on, but as a general kind of EV 101, level 1 is the slowest of the 3 types. This would be equivalent to plugging your car into the wall outlet at your house, in your office, same outlet that charges your phone. This is going to take your car a long time, but the benefit here is it's very accessible. They're in every building. They're in the parking garage. They're used for lighting, you name it. So accessibility is number 1, but doesn't charge your car quick. But if you're in a pinch, this could work. Level 2, this is the real workhorse of the EV charging industry. This represents 95% plus of ports in the wild today. And the reason is it strikes the balance between economies of scale, price point, and performance. And so the thinking here is a level 2 is going to charge your car in 4 to 6 hours, depending on the vehicle. And this is where we see the masses charging, because it uses 240 or 208 volt. So the same power input as a washer, a dryer, a large electrical appliance. And this is going to deliver between 6 and 10 kilowatts to your vehicle. So the thinking here is for office buildings, for people that are dwelling between 2 and 6 hours at a property, this is going to be the charger that we select because it matches the expectation of the driver. And finally, DC fast, or level 3. These are the large ones. They're about the size of a fridge. You don't see them everywhere because they're very expensive. You're looking between $80,000 and $100,000 per port. So the costs are quite high. The benefit here is you charge quick. You can charge a car in 20, 30 minutes. But this isn't the solution for the masses because of the price point. And later I'm going to get into why that is.
Great. So then how many chargers should I actually install?
So if we know a lot of chargers are going to be level 2s, given the use case, dwell times between 2 and 6 hours, we want to look at this specific building that we're talking about. This could be your building or a building you've been hired to work on. We know by 2030, we can expect about 53% of new cars to be EVs. You can just take a walk around your parking lot and just survey how many EVs are in there on an average day, as well as just send a quick survey monkey out to your tenants. We do this a lot. We can send you a template to make it easy. And people can just fill in, are they looking to buy an EV? Do they own an EV? Is it on the 1-year horizon, 2-year, 5-year horizon? And this will give you some data that you can work with on the horizon for how quickly you can expect EVs to come to your property. So that translates into how many chargers can I install? The number of chargers is going to depend on your building and how much you want to invest into the first phase of EV charging. The number, how many can I install, often comes back to what electrical capacity is available. But the nice thing here is if we start with an electrical capacity assessment with an electrician that knows your building, or one of our qualified electricians that we subcontract nationally, we can give you that picture. And the reason we do this is because we want to identify any electrical bottlenecks in the system, because infrastructure is our number 1 cost to bring this service to the building. So that often brings us to budget. If we can start the conversation with an approximate budget, this helps us get to that end solution a lot faster. We definitely try and avoid the scenario where we're giving proposals and quotes with no budget, because we know that a lot of the time these decisions come down to fiscal budgets. And so if we want to get charging in the building for next year, let's pencil in a budget and let's work within it. And the nice thing is any project that we're designing it with scalability in mind, meaning if we put in 2 chargers today, we're going to be putting in the groundwork so that adding the 4th, 10th, 20th charger in the building down the road is more economical. The other thing too is we can look at an OpEx versus a CapEx approach. If you want to shift some of that cost to be more OpEx, we do have, charging as a service, as we call it, where Switch will come in, pay for, own, and operate the installation. And we can also make use of some local incentives and tax credits as well, based on your geography. So knowing kind of the administrative side of rolling out a project, let's talk about how we can use the technology, the hardware, and the software to best optimize for the building. And when I say optimize, I mean optimize price point, optimize impact of energy on the building, as well as the performance to the EV driver.
So the question is, how can I just buy a level 2 charger, install them, and just start charging?
You certainly could. You can go to Home Depot and buy a level 2 charger. But the problem is that's going to be a charger that you cannot control behavior with, nor can you meter energy. So yes, you would technically be able to charge a car, but you're not going to be able to monitor and manage that installation. And for the viewers, the reason why we bring this topic up is because if you look early in the EV charging industry, around 2015 to 2018, when these things first started popping up, a lot of the chargers going in the ground were actually free. And very quickly did the industry realize free charging typically means drivers in the local community will abuse that. They will park in your lot just to reap the benefits of free charging. And so if you put in a non-intelligent, simplified electrical plug, people will abuse that, and you'll not have a way to recoup the money expensed towards energy, as well as guide the user behavior in the parking lot. And so this is what brings us to the 4 core pillars of technology for an EV charging project. And you may need all of them, you might need some of them, but they should be considered when looking at scoping a project for your building. So let's talk the EV charging hardware in the infrastructure. That's our starting point.
So what should I look for when purchasing kind of a level 2 charger?
There's a lot of specs, and it can be confusing. And I know this coming from the engineering side of this. People can often be overwhelmed by charging specs. From our perspective, the hardware is a commodity. The chargers all do the same thing. You can access, pay, meter, and manage charging. And so we don't really put much emphasis on what type of model you select. When we're recommending a model, what we're looking for is reliability, price point, as well as does the performance meet the need. And so generally, the only real core technical spec you want to look for is a standard called OCPP. Why do you look for this? The analogy I want to draw on is in the use of cell phones. When cell phones were locked to the carrier, you needed to buy a new cell phone if you wanted to move between carriers. If you do not use this OCPP standard, you can think of the charger as a locked cell phone. So you would be tied into the service provider operating it for the life of that hardware. And if for whatever reason, if you want to change providers, just like you would a cell phone, OCPP enables you to keep that hardware and just simply move providers like you would internet, cell phone, you name it. And so really it's de-risking the asset long-term, because the hardware purchase is going to last the lifetime of the hardware, which is 10 to 15 years. And so the freedom of choice there is really important for the industry, especially in a day where service uptime and service standards are top of mind. A quick hot list of some of the EV chargers we work with. We work with all the major brands, and so we're not locked into a particular vendor. The benefit here is we can find the right one that meets the needs of the property. Everything from level 2 right to the big DC fast chargers.
Next question. What other considerations are needed in addition just to the EV chargers themselves?
Yeah, so we can make it easy on the hardware side. Like I said, the industry has very much been commoditized in terms of the hardware, so there's not much preference on what specifically we pick. Once we have an EV charger model in mind, we can look at what accessories also are going to complement the installation. Everything from pedestals to cable retractors, what can keep the EV chargers at that property neat and tidy so that it doesn't become a burden on the on-site staff to maintain and upkeep. This photo here is a good example where a simple cable retractor keeps the cables neat and tidy so you don't end up with parking spaghetti in your parking lot, as well as it keeps it up and out of reach for lawn care, snowplow, and so maintenance and reliability is also improved. The cable is the single most replaced item. So if we can keep that neat, tidy, and protected from tampering or accident, then we're setting the building up for success long term. We can look at the electrical. Where are we going to take electricity from? The name of the game to reduce cost on the capital side of the project is let's try and put the EV chargers as closely as we can to the electrical supply. Generally, the further away it is, the more expensive it's going to be, whether that's indoor or outdoor. And so if you have the freedom to select specific parking spots for your EV chargers, that's one way to directly reduce the cost to install in your building. For underground garages, one thing often overlooked is internet connection. And so we need to deliver internet connection, one, for the users to use the chargers and pay, but also for the chargers to record how much energy is being consumed by each user and bill them for it. And so we always like to pass this on as whether you're working with us or you're working with a contractor of your choice, ask what is the plan to get internet connection for these chargers. That way there's no surprises down the road when you install and have to think about this. I've definitely seen my fair share of projects where this was overlooked, and this was a change order that had to be issued during installation, which was more expensive than the property would have liked. And so internet. And then finally, software. And that's where we get to the second pillar of technology in an EV charging deployment. What does software do? You might be asking yourself, why do I need software to manage what are otherwise large electrical outlets? And I can give you the answer why. But before I give you that answer, let's ask ourselves the following questions. If I install chargers at my property, who can access these chargers? Is it tenants, residents, staff, fleet? Who are they? How do I know how much revenue I've generated by recouping the cost of energy or potentially parking related fees like loitering? How does a driver pay for the electricity? What if all of the chargers are on at the same time? What happens? Is there a demand charge to my building? Are there risks to the electrical system? What if a driver leaves their car in the EV charging space? So this is behavior. How do I control that? And then finally, how do I know if something breaks? All of these questions are very important, and they are solved by software. And that's why software is one of the key pillars. And so the way we approach it, we connect all of the chargers to what we call Switch Portal. And this is a tool that you will passively operate. This isn't something you're going to be signing in day to day. That allows you to see what is the user behavior and driver behavior in the charging spaces in my building. You can access all of the data, who, what, when, where, why. It's all in there. We make it easy. But I want to be clear here. This is not something that a site staff person would have to sign into every day to maintain. This is more of a passive tool to keep track and edit settings like pricing and time of use. So one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, my building was built, a couple decades ago, and it wasn't sized to account for this electrical load in the parking garage. And we can't afford to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on infrastructure. Good question, good analysis. But the good news is this isn't the barrier, and money is ideally not the solution. We want to be efficient here. So how do we do that? So bringing us back to the original question that Greg asked me, how many chargers can I install to satisfy the demand of the EV drivers while not breaking the bank, staying within the project budget? How do we do that? And so I want to introduce the term energy management. So Chris, I see your question here in the chat. How do we manage this? So this graph here is basically a textbook example of the worst case scenario that we're trying to avoid. We add EV charging to the building, and it also coincides with the building's electrical peak. If you're in the facility space, you know this problem gets expensive very quickly with your utility. So how do we avoid that? Going back to the use case for level 2 charging, we want to see what is the use case for the drivers in my building. And given the dwell time is, not is beyond 2 hours, we can take advantage of when charging happens. So to avoid going into the red zone, we can basically shift consumption to the hours where there's capacity available to us. If you were to put an energy meter on your building, you would see your peak load often doesn't occur for very long, small 15-minute intervals here and there. So we want to avoid charging and adding to that 15-minute interval where the building loads are at their peak. But we want to use all of the remaining time outside of that and take advantage of the existing capacity. And that's when we can charge vehicles. And so, Chris, to your question, how do we do that? There's a number of ways, and it comes down to kind of the wiring. So I'll tread lightly on the technical jargon here, but these are core concepts that kind of explain how it gets done. So we can do things called circuit sharing or dedicated circuits. Circuit sharing is basically when you load up one or multiple circuits onto the chargers onto the same circuit. This is very basic. It's efficient, saves a lot of cost. You sacrifice performance. It does the job. We see this a lot, but we're not limited to this. We can also dedicate a portion of a panel to EV chargers, each with their own dedicated circuit. And then the chargers would share the available capacity. But this would be a static approach, meaning if you set the limit to 100 amps, it doesn't matter what the other loads are doing, the chargers will never consume more than 100 amps. But where Switch takes it to another level is the use of sensors. So if you see here on the graph, if you can see my mouse, we can put sensors at different points in the electrical system that will give us a real-time reading of what capacity is available, whether it be a panel, a transformer, the main distribution panel, and the EV chargers will balance the load accordingly. Meaning if we detect in the evening there's a lot of power available to us, we can charge the vehicles at a pretty high rate. But as the building goes through its daily load profile and reaches its limits, we will temporarily pull back on the EV chargers so we do not add to that peak. And as I mentioned earlier, that peak can get expensive very quickly. And so the use of these real-time load sensors in the building allow us to add any number of EV chargers to the building, and they would only charge the vehicles when we can detect and read that there is existing capacity available to us. And so this is a little bit different than how the electrical code has worked historically. And so you'll see a lot of the policy in the last 6 to 12 months actually now recognize these systems as ways to add as many chargers as you like to the building, provided you have the safety mechanisms in place, in which case we do. So Chris, I can take that offline if you want to get into more specifics, but generally that's how the technology works. So the driver experience, and I can maybe include Elliot's comment here on how loitering can come into play. So the software angle, so for an EV, they need the software to do 3 things for them. Use the charger, so click start. They need to be able to pay for it, pay for the electricity they consume, track all of the transactions they paid for, etc., as well as get help if they're having trouble. We don't want them going to the facilities staff. We want them calling us because we're the EV chargers experts and we can get the job done, get their car charging, and they can move on. And so the drivers can do that one of 4 ways. They can use an app, a website, an RFID card, or a credit card. And so how do they pay? The EV drivers pay through the app, or their account. Switch collects that money, and then on a quarterly basis, we deposit that to the building. And all we're really doing there is just collecting the money, keeping it in a virtual bank account, and then depositing that into what is most commonly the shared facilities account for the building. And so we're recouping the cost of energy and some margin in some cases. I will highlight here, the rate that is set for charging is defined by the property, and Switch is basically just the mechanism to deploy that rate. And so the rates are designed by you, and that way you can set it depending if you have a, prime real estate, whatever it might be.
Which on that, like now in Canada, you can now, you always used to be able to only do like per hour, like $1 per hour, $2 per hour, some sort of like number, but now you can do it by kilowatt. So you can now be charging people to have a proper association to the energy being used. And in that, you can do different rates like time of use, so we have various ways in which you can structure your pricing according to your needs, be it if you want to make money or ROI on these chargers, or you just want to recoup electricity and a little bit of margin, like all those different aspects, we can work with you to figure out how best to design the rate structure for your particular property.
Yeah, and specifically on loitering, I wanted to get to Elliot's comment. Loitering is a tool that we can use to enforce that people can charge their car, use the asset, and then free that up for the next possible driver. We don't want people parking there and hogging the station if their car is full. And so once we detect that their car is full, we can give them a grace period. It's often 15 to 30 minutes. And then beyond that, we charge them a prime rate. Their car would end charging, but we would be charging them a loitering fee to incentivize them to move. And so there's financial penalty to the user. We don't recommend using this out of the gates. Just, for the first 6 months, we like to promote, hey, community, get to learn how to use these and get comfortable. But we do see loitering come into play for high volume parking garages, especially in urban settings where parking is at a premium. And so that is controlled by you, the operator. Our accounts team can work with you to set up the correct rates to make sure they're not too aggressive. But that's generally how we enforce the physical behavior on site, on top of time of use rates, access control, things like that. So just being conscious of time, I can maybe start to wrap things up just to be sensitive to the time, and we can open up the floor to questions. So if you have any questions remaining, type them in the chat. We'll get to them in a couple of minutes. Generally, when it comes to EV charging, reliability is everything. If you look up EV charging news and headlines, all the talk is how do we deliver a good service to the drivers? Because if you need to charge your car and you pull up to a facility and it doesn't work, I can tell from my own experience, this is not a very fun experience because it often disrupts your daily plans if you are relying on that. And so Switch is a plan for that. We advertise our service rates. Within the portal, you can see within every charger what our uptime is, what our service is, any errors. And that's one way that we hold ourselves accountable, but as well as hold the industry accountable to delivering good service to the buildings. One thing we don't like to see is abandoned chargers that don't work. And one way to do that is to just be transparent with what the technical uptime is, both for the charger as well as the network across any site, any portfolio. And so the good news is you have access to this. So if for whatever reason Switch under delivers, you've got the data to prove that. So finally, to wrap things up, I've moved quickly through how we plan installs and what you can do once they're in the building and how do you operate them. So let's just quickly recap the structured approach here. We like to plan. What can we expect in terms of behavior in the building? That leads us to the electrical side of things, which is how much energy do we need? And when working with whether it's a preferred contractor of your choice or one of ours, we can instruct the electricians exactly what we need to do, as well as pull on certain variables to save cost. An example is, like I mentioned, if we can get the chargers close to the electrical room, that's the single largest way to save money on the capital expense for the project. The third item here, once it's in the ground, how do we manage that? That's where Switch's technology comes into play. It's a set and forget type of mentality where you work with our accounts team to set the charges up as you're liking. And then maybe once, twice a year, you check in on them just to make sure everything is rolling and operating as expected in terms of the user behavior. And then finally, if something goes wrong, Switch has 24/7, 365 customer and technical support. And with our Switch Care package, we would take care of any replacements or fixes, so your team doesn't have to. What we're trying to do is basically reduce the headaches that EV charging could bring to the property. We don't want it to be another burden that the property management has to deal with. We want it to be a full turnkey, self-sustaining service. So let's move to questions. We're about 31 minutes past the hour.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Thomas. Let's have the questions. Have it out. Elliot is a great one to start with. Incentive or grant programs from the province and federal government. Yeah, I won't keep any question. You can read it. Thomas, what's your thoughts on how we work with our customers?
Yeah. So we've got a grants team internally here at Switch. So depending on your geography, wherever you reside, our team is capable of doing that process for you, as well as hand-holding you for any questions. So you can consider us the experts in that regard. Do the programs roll over every year? That's always unclear. We do see them changing year over year. Generally, the federal programs give us kind of like a 2-year horizon. So unfortunately, like our message is like, there's no time than now if you do have a grant available, just because we don't know when it could close up because of funding windows. So if you share more information on where the building is, maybe offline, I can direct you to the right people.
And I think right now, right, to your question with specifics, like federally, ZEVA, which is the federal program, is closed currently. They had their last round ending a few months ago. Are they coming with another one? Thomas, I don't know if that's confirmed yet, right? Like they're still determining if and when.
Yeah, they usually give us only a couple months in advance of them opening the program. But my current understanding is that the federal government has committed to a certain funding allocation for the next 2 years. And so I believe that program is going to chip away at that. I don't know when the next intake will open, but historically, they usually open one sometime in the fall. And so that's where you would want to engage, whether it's us or somebody else, to build that project proposal and do the application. Historically, the success rate for these applications, it's competitive, but Switch has a very, very high success rate given we've been doing this from the program's inception. So we're able to provide you some expertise on how to make your application the most attractive for a funding offer.
And then Chris mentioned about measurement systems need to be Measurement Canada approved. If not, how are you able to avoid that approval?
Yeah, so you do not need Measurement Canada approval if you are billing by time. Historically, this is what the industry has done. But we are now seeing a shift to drivers having the preference to bill by the kilowatt, just like you would have for a standard electrical meter at a building or house. And so the good news is, if you do need Measurement Canada approval, we've got the hardware and the software to do that. As it stands today, not every hardware model meets the Measurement Canada approval, but we've got 5 or 6 models that do. So we would just need to make sure that we give you one of those units that meets all of the Measurement Canada technical requirements. And as of right now, they only are really asking for it's a bit of paperwork to apply for the building level permission to bill by the kilowatt. Again, our team will basically send you everything. You just kind of need to have a signature. We take care of it. And that would allow the building to bill drivers by the kilowatt hour. And maybe I'll add on to that. In terms of cost, you're not going to see any cost difference between a Measurement Canada certified system and a regular system. There's no difference there. So from my perspective, the only difference is just having to fill out a bit of paperwork and getting that approval.
Great. Yeah. Anyone else on the call? Any other hurdles, burning questions, stumbling blocks that you're considering as you go down that path, either for yourself or for customers or clients that you're working with? Anything left you guys got? For this conversation, this is being recorded. We'll send an email afterwards with a recording to this. If you have any particular questions, for sure, Thomas is very available, be it through LinkedIn or otherwise. We'll have his email in the email that comes out, so that you can ask any direct questions. Or if you want to talk to somebody in your area, both Ramsey, who couldn't make it here, as well as Steve, who are on the West Coast, can definitely talk you through any questions you have about your property or whatnot. Back to the questions. A building needs a special approval to bill somebody for electricity, from Chris.
Yeah. So the way it works is Measurement Canada needs to recognize the devices at your property to bill by the kilowatt. I'll try not to give you the long-winded answer, but that process comes to an end at the end of this year. So January 1st, 2026 and onward, all you need to do is make sure you're purchasing the right hardware, and then you are automatically added to that list. If you were to install between now and December 31st, you have to just basically apply for permission. It's a process that they stood up about 2.5 years ago just to get buildings charging by the kilowatt hour, because the EV charger technology kind of fell outside of the jurisdiction to bill by the kilowatt hour, since it was only really being done for meters. And so this was kind of a new technology and a new process that they had to stand up. And so there's a bit of policy framework coming into play at the end of this year, and after that, it should be a pretty standard, easy process for any building.
And is the hardware interchangeable to bill either by hour or by kilowatt hour?
It is, yeah. That's just a software setting. So the performance to the driver is unchanged. It's just a little toggle in Portal whether we want to bill by the hour or kilowatt.
And then, Chris, perhaps in certain markets only. No, that's Canadian wide, right?
Yeah.
No problem. No problem. Great
question. So, Greg, are you? Does everyone here have our emails if they want to send a follow up?
Yeah. So I'll put it's Thomas Martin at SWTCH right here in the chat for those who have burning questions that want to reach out. But you'll all get an email tomorrow, most likely, if not today, with the recording as well as link, and as well as Thomas and Ramsey, their email addresses. If you want to, we're around. You can find us online as well, LinkedIn. But other than that, if any last questions, I think this was great. Thomas, thanks so much for going deep in some of these areas. Everyone, thanks for being part of this conversation. And yeah, good luck on your EV charging journey, wherever it takes you. We're happy to help if helpful. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.